you're watching Headlines. I'm Anastasiya Lavrina. Fighting in Goma, the largest city in eastern Congo, has erupted into unprecedented violence as Rwandan-backed M23 rebels clash with government forces and local militants. On Monday, the rebels stormed the city of 2 million, signaling a catastrophic escalation of a conflict that has lingered for 3 decades. This marks the worst violence in the region since 2012, as tensions rooted in the aftermath of the Rwandan genocide and a brutal battle for control over the area's vast natural resources continue to drive instability. The situation has worsened with the tragic deaths of 4 South African peacekeepers on Tuesday, intensifying concerns about the safety of civilians and international peacekeeping efforts in the region. More on this in my program right now. Joining me from Netherlands is Liederwide Bergmos, Associate Professor and Senior Researcher at the African Studies Center in Leiden. We're welcome to Headlines.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining our discussion now. So the M23 rebels have stormed Goma, which is a significant escalation. What is driving this recent surge in violence, and why is Goma such a critical target for these groups?
Well, the M23 has been in the region active for quite some time. It has been in existence in 2012. At that time, in 2013, at some point it was defeated and was forced to withdraw. It was not completely disbanded, so the organization or the movement continued to exist, but was occupying a quite small territory in northern Kivu. Only since recently, in 2021 particularly, a situation has been escalating again, and with support also allegedly of the Rwandan army, has been gaining strength and been occupying more and more parts of the region of northern and southern Kivu in eastern DRC. So Goma is a border city, a large border city, as you mentioned, and a very important one in terms of trade in the region. So it is actually the place where provisions are coming through, where trade with Rwanda, but also other countries in the region, is an important border town in that sense. So with the rebel movement taking over Goma, this means that this part of North Kivu has become significantly in the hands of the M23, and that the population is kind of cut off also from other parts of the region of possibilities for provision. The borders with Rwanda has been closed, so it has a very significant change in the field. It's been a very strategic city in that sense.
Indeed. And what do you think about that involvement of Rwanda more in details and its backed M23 history? If you can explain us shortly, how do you see the Rwanda's involvement in what's happening today?
I think to try to understand better Rwandan involvement, we need to go back indeed about 30 years, 31 years. So in 1994 in Rwanda, the genocide against the Tutsi took place. After this, a lot of people fled from Rwanda, also genocidaires, so people who had been involved in the genocide, and they held up in Congo. This was the start of further escalation of tensions and the start of a civil war in 1996 in eastern Congo. This led to a lot of displaced people, but also increasing insecurity in the experience of Tutsi, who were Congolese Tutsi. And in that period, already since the 1990s, their citizenship had been contested. And Rwanda had as an important objective, or as to make sure that there would no longer be threat from Hutu extremists at their border, so that Rwanda would remain safe. And the fact that that Rwandan Hutu were there forming rebel groups and creating alliances with other rebel movements that were there in this period of extreme instability, created this continuous threat actually also that was experienced at the hand of Rwanda. In addition, Rwanda has very significant economic interests in the region. In the eastern part of Congo, it's the richest part of this vast country. There's a lot of mines with coltan, with gold, and these are of economic interest for the trade also in Rwanda. Since I think about 2016, gold is the primary export product of Rwanda, but most of this gold does not come from the Rwandan soil, but comes from across the border. And so the economic stakes in Eastern DRC is for Rwanda, as also for some other countries in the region, are also quite high and play a role in their involvement in and interest in this region.
So that's clear that the ongoing battle for control over natural resources in the region also contribute to the violence and instability in Goma and surrounding areas, right?
Yeah, so you have, at the one hand, there's this advancement of the insecurity of how the tensions and the rebel movements that are on in Eastern Congo, how they pose a threat to Rwanda. And on the other hand, you have these clear economic interests in the riches of the soils.
Well, the United States of America, Britain and France already called on nationals to leave Goma while airports and borders are still open. The deaths of 4 South African peacekeepers, as already said, have raised alarms about the safety of international forces. What does this loss mean for the future of peacekeeping efforts in the region?
I think the peacekeeping missions in the region have already been under threat for quite some time. They have been in the region for a long time, and the instability is continuing. So their mandate and the possibilities have been discussed already repeatedly on what we can expect from them or what we should expect from them. And besides the South African peacekeepers, there were also other peacekeepers from other nationalities that have been killed in these battles, in the recent battles with the M23 advancing their terrain. So there's this serious discussion of what they are able to do. From the Rwandan point of view, they are saying also that the UN peacekeeping mission should withdraw because they risk to become an armed group. On the other side, it's actually reclaimed to help restore that the UN takes a much stronger position in trying to help restore order and condemn Rwanda for their involvement in the region.
Actually, you already started to answer my next question about the involvement of the international community, especially the United Nations. How should it respond to the escalating violence? Probably we can speak about sanctions or peacekeeping negotiations or a more robust military intervention, the most viable options.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion on what are the possibilities right now. And many initiatives have been taken over the past decades, and they have not been successful. But if we look at 2012, for instance, when also the M23 had taken over the city of Goma, then you saw a very fierce and powerful reaction of the international community, putting pressure on Rwanda to withdraw its support and to the M23 to stop and withdraw. But now we are waiting for something like that happening again. Today, I don't know if you have seen the footage already also of what is happening in Kinshasa. A lot of people have been very angry, going to the streets, attacking some of the embassies of foreign embassies of the US, of France, of the one of Belgium and the Netherlands. So they have been attacking these for being with the complaint that they feel that they need to react much more strongly in condemning the role of Rwanda in this move for Goma. And so they are very dissatisfied with the continuous insecurity in that region and sometimes the lack of involvement or the lack of powerful involvement of international actors, and on the other hand, the involvement of some armed regional actors particularly.
We can see how the people are trying to escape. So there is a real humanitarian crisis happening now in the region. Continuing talking about the possible military intervention. How has the presence of militants, both local and external, actually complicated efforts to bring peace to Eastern Congo?
This is a very good question and a very difficult one. And so instability has been reigning in the region for over 3 decades, and this makes it very difficult. It's been very fertile ground for different rebel movements, different missions to try and stop these foreign powers that have been playing a role, that have been trying to support. But the situation has become so complex that it's quite difficult also, and it's not a military intervention. It's also the question who then works with who. And you have all these alliances between different rebel movements and government forces, and the Congolese army and the Rwandan army. And this makes the situation not only extremely complicated, but also tense in terms of questions on how to move forward. It's a very treacherous terrain in that sense, and particularly regarding military intervention.
So as I understood from your previous answer, the local population might be against any intervention from outside, right?
Well, they want a more fierce reaction from the international community and sanctioning, for instance, Rwanda. Rwanda has not been very strongly condemned, it seems, for their involvement in Eastern Congo for the past years, and which has been, even though there has been critique and there have been reports showing their involvement, and Rwanda has been denying this for a large extent and at least not confirming it. But you see that the international community and the EU, for instance, the US, they have not been following up on these reports with sanctions, for instance, with economic sanctions. So still provisioning aid. Rwanda has also been quite active and prominent in the African peacekeeping missions for which they received funding, quite substantial funding. And then critique is that this funding is rather not directed to these other missions, but actually also for invasion or for support in Congo. So these, in that sense, there are all these different how can I say, all these different developments at the same time, whereby international community has not been condemning very strongly what has been happening in terms of the role of Rwanda. And so the consequences are that the violence has been escalating and has affected insecurity in the region a lot, with a lot of people that have been displaced. And many of these families, they have been displaced again. And so people have been fleeing time and again. And you hear also of people who have fled to Goma in search of safety, and they are now forced to flee again, and they are just desperate, saying, where do we go to now? We have already been fleeing for years, and this is now again, so where can we find safety? So there's quite a lot of desperation in that sense as well.
Apart from military intervention, again, humanitarian crisis there. So what are the expectations from the international organization or any other country, in support of the ordinary people, civilians, in the post-conflict development, or even now while there is this very intensified phase of escalation in the country and around?
Yeah, so as I've been saying, the situation has been quite devastating for a very long time. I think the international community, many countries, also in the region, but also globally, have been underestimating perhaps the effects of the scale of the violence, the intensity of the violence that has been taking place in this part of the world. What the international community can do, try to work more, collaborate together. But as I mentioned already, it's a very there are a lot of interests of different countries, also regional actors in the riches of Congo. And in the past, we have seen that these interests and different alliances have actually led to escalation of violence. So international involvement and regional involvement have not always, in that sense, been supportive of peace so much. There's a lot of interest also in terms of the resources that are in this part of the world.
What role do regional actors such as Uganda, Burundi, and other African nations may play in the current situation? Could they be more involved in facilitating peace?
I think I hope for a stronger involvement of the regional actors. And right now, you see that people in Congo are also angry with Uganda, with Kenya, and have been looting these embassies to express attacking these embassies to express their anger towards the failing role. But most recently, you have seen some attempts by the president of Kenya, as well as the president of Angola, to try and mediate between the conflict. Interestingly, these attempts to mediation were focusing on the role of DR Congo, Kinshasa, and Rwanda, and not so much directly with the M23. So that already shows a little bit also the central role of Rwanda in this ordeal, and not only the rebel movement so much. And so the hope is that they can play a stronger role, but discussions and debate between these countries and different interests, I think that complicate the situation. The relation between Burundi and Rwanda, for instance, it's not a very positive relationship. Burundi has been fighting on the side of the Congolese army against the M23. So you see that there's these different alliances and relations and interests and fears also about their own national securities, economic interests and fears for national security that have put these countries on different sides of the violence.
You have a great experience of research, being actively involved in that region. Therefore, what do you predict for the future of the conflict in Goma, your personal expectations, and what do you think will be the best scenario?
What I think would be the best scenario is that there is a lot of pressure on Rwanda and on the M23 to retreat. I think it is very problematic if there becomes a surrogate government, which seems to be being put in place in these places that the M23 has already been taking over. There's a surrogate system of governance being set up. And so I think this is this would be very problematic for the long-term stability in the region. I fear that there will actually be an escalation of conflict in the region, with the M23 going in even further, trying to move into southern Kivu, where you have Bukavu, and on the border with and Uvira, which is on the border with Burundi. So drawing in other regional actors and countries. I fear if there's not a lot of if there's no strong reaction now of regional actors, of other regional countries, as well as the international community, the Western community, the UN, I fear that there will be an escalation of conflict. And as they say in African context, when two bulls fight, it's the grass that suffer. And I think we have seen this for a very long time already, for 30 years in that region. So
actually, that was my last question for today. The United Nations and other international powers are increasingly concerned that the ongoing conflict in Congo could escalate into a regional war that claimed millions of lives, primarily due to hunger and disease. Could this conflict in Goma lead to a larger regional war? And if so, what could that mean for the stability of Central Africa as a whole?
I think this is the great concern that is on everybody's mind, especially those who are living in that region, on how things will evolve and to what extent they will escalate. So, this is exactly the fear that is there.
Right. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining our program today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, dear viewers, for watching Headlines on A News. My name is Anastasiya Lavrina. Today we had a very special guest joined us from Netherlands. Is Liederwiede Bergmos, Associate Professor and Senior Researcher at the African Studies Center in Leiden. Do stay with A News and see you in the next edition.